climate. If you look at the raw climate data from the summer of 2026, it's like the old scripts for surviving a hot summer are they're completely useless now.
Yeah, they really are.
Because usually, when we talk about summer weather, there's this expectation of familiar rhythms. You pull out the shorts, you complain about the humidity, maybe you run the sprinklers a bit longer. It's a seasonal inconvenience.
Right, a temporary thing.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But what we are looking at right now honestly feels like a different planet.
Oh, it really does. I mean, we have completely crossed out of the realm of predictable summer. Millions of people across Southern Europe, North America, and East Asia are living through conditions that were considered statistical impossibilities just 30 years ago.
It's staggering. We've got temperatures hitting 44 degrees Celsius, and for those using Fahrenheit, that's over 111 degrees right in the Mediterranean.
Which is just brutal heat.
Yeah, and we're seeing these sudden flash droughts drying up massive, historically stable river basins like the Rhine and the Danube in a matter of weeks. And looking back just to 2024, wildland fires destroyed a global area roughly the size of Greece.
Which, is the absolute definition of a systemic shock. We aren't just dealing with a few extra hot days here. We're dealing with fundamentally altered mechanical rules for how the Earth systems actually operate.
Okay, let's unpack this, because today's deep dive is centered on a brilliant, honestly incredibly dense interview transcript with a leading climate physicist and macroeconomist titled Navigating the Pyro-Thermal Era.
It's a fantastic source.
It really is. And our mission today isn't just to gawk at the scary numbers. We want to help you understand the underlying physics of why this is happening, and most importantly, map out how you can strategically navigate this new reality.
Yes, that's the key. Navigation.
Right. But to do that, we actually have to start by looking up, because the engine for all this destruction on the ground is entirely invisible, happening right above our heads.
That's exactly right. The atmosphere dictates everything.
And here is where I think the biggest public misconception lies, actually. A lot of us view global warming linearly.
Like a straight line.
Yeah. You hear 1.5 degrees of warming, and it sounds like simply bumping up the thermostat in your house from 20 degrees Celsius to 21.5 degrees.
Right.
It just feels, I don't know, slightly warmer. Take off a sweater. But the physics outlined in our source material paints a totally different picture. Why doesn't that simple thermostat analogy work?
Well, because your living room isn't a complex fluid dynamical system.
Fair point.
When you warm the global atmosphere by an average of 1.2 to 1.5 degrees Celsius, you aren't just making the air a tiny bit toastier. You are injecting immense, unimaginable amounts of thermal energy right into the sky.
Wow.
And that energy fundamentally alters the thermodynamics of water.
How so? Like, what is the actual mechanism there?
It comes down to a foundational rule of physics called the Clausius-Clapeyron equation.
The Clausius-Clapeyron equation.
Yes. And this law dictates that for every 1 degree Celsius increase in air temperature, the atmosphere's capacity to hold water vapor increases by roughly 7%.
Wait, I want to push back on that for a second.
Sure.
If the atmosphere is holding 7% more water for every degree, shouldn't a wetter sky mean a wetter ground? Like, why are rivers drying up and forests turning to ash if there's literally more water up there?
What's fascinating here is that this single physical law is actually the engine driving two completely opposite extremes.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So, yes, when that supersaturated heavy air finally cools down, it drops all that extra water at once, which is exactly why we are seeing such intense, concentrated flash flooding.
Right, the extreme storms.
Exactly. But on the flip side, when that air is hot, it acts like a giant aggressive sponge. The technical term for this is vapor pressure deficit, but physicists often just call it atmospheric thirst.
Atmospheric thirst, that's a great term.
Right. Think of it like a vacuum pump. When you combine this hotter, thirstier air with a persistent high-pressure system, what we call a heat dome, that air just sits over a region and gets stuck.
And it just bakes everything?
Worse than that. Because the hot air has a massive capacity to hold water, but there's no water currently in it, it creates a literal pressure gradient. It forcefully sucks the moisture out of living plants, out of the grasses, out of the topsoil.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, the landscape doesn't just naturally dry out in the sun. The water is actively pulled out of it by the sky.
So an entire vibrant forest basically transforms into a warehouse of dry fuel, just waiting for a spark.
Precisely.
That perfectly explains why they call it the Pyro-Thermal era. The atmosphere provides the heat and the vacuum pump. Oh. But we have to acknowledge that the ground itself is uniquely vulnerable right now, too, because forests have always burned.
Of course.
Throughout history, fire wasn't necessarily a bad thing, right?
Not at all. For most of human history, particularly throughout the Holocene, that's the 11,700-year epoch of stable climate we've been enjoying fire, was actually nature's housekeeper.
Housekeeping.
Yeah, in places like the American West, the Mediterranean, or the boreal forests of Siberia, low-intensity fires would naturally sweep through the underbrush every few years. Indigenous peoples understood this intimately.
Right, they use controlled burns.
Exactly. They utilized controlled burns for millennia to recycle nutrients and keep those landscapes resilient, ensuring fires never got hot enough to kill the massive old-growth trees.
So fire itself wasn't the enemy, it was the tool.
Yes.
But reading the source material, it seems like we hit a massive historical double whammy starting in the 20th century.
We absolutely did. We made a colossal institutional misstep.
Tell me about that.
Well, after the Great Fire in 1910, which burned millions of acres across the U.S. Northwest, forestry agencies essentially panicked. They adopted a strict policy of total fire suppression. It was known as the 10 a.m. policy.
The 10 a.m. policy.
Yeah, the mandate was to extinguish every single newly reported fire by 10 a.m. the following morning.
Which, I mean, sounds incredibly efficient on paper, but completely ignores how a forest ecosystem actually functions.
Exactly. The intention was to protect timber supplies in growing towns. But by aggressively snuffing out every tiny surface fire for an entire century, we accidentally interrupted the natural housekeeping.
So everything just accumulated.
Yes. Decades of dead wood, leaf litter, and dense brush just piled up. We basically spent 100 years packing the forests wall to wall with kindling.
So to clarify this compound tragedy for everyone listening, we basically spent an entire century building a massive, continent-spanning bonfire out of dead wood on the forest floor, right at the exact historical moment we decided to turn up the planetary oven with greenhouse gas emissions.
Yes. It's a perfect storm. And when those two forces fully converged over the last 2 decades, the actual physical character of wildfires changed.
They stopped being housekeeping fires.
Right. We stopped seeing those gentle surface fires that clean the forest floor. Instead, we entered the era of megafires and crown fires.
Crown fires?
Yeah, these are high-intensity infernos that leap hundreds of feet into the tops of mature trees and move at just terrifying speeds.
And the visual described in the interview for this is just apocalyptic. These megafires burn so intensely that they literally create their own localized weather systems. Pyrocumulonimbus clouds.
Fire thunderstorms.
Right. A thunderstorm made of smoke and fire that shoots up into the stratosphere and then spits dry lightning miles ahead of the actual fire line to start brand new blazes.
It's hard to even wrap your head around that level of energy.
It really is.
And it is a self-propagating disaster. The heat from the burning century-old fuel creates the storm creates the lightning creates more fire.
Here's where it gets really interesting, though. Because a heat dome in June and a megafire in August aren't just isolated local events. The source goes deep into how these disasters feed into each other on a massive global scale.
It's a perfectly linked chain reaction, and if we trace it chronologically, it actually starts way up north. The Arctic is warming 3 to 4 times faster than the rest of the planet.
Which is called Arctic amplification, right?
Yeah, correct. As the white sea ice melts, it exposes dark ocean water, which absorbs solar heat instead of reflecting it. This rapid warming shrinks the temperature difference between the equator and the North Pole.
And that temperature difference is the engine that powers the jet stream. It's like a river flowing downhill. If you flatten out the hill, the river loses its momentum.
That is a perfect analogy. The jet stream relies on that temperature gradient to whip around the northern hemisphere. When it slows down, it slumps.
It slumps.
Yeah, it forms these large, sluggish, stagnant meanders. Think of huge waves getting stuck in place. The high-pressure ridges of those waves trap sinking air underneath them, compressing and heating it.
And those are your heat domes.
Exactly. That causes the vapor pressure deficit, the atmospheric thirst, to spike.
And how do the plants respond to that? Because they aren't just inanimate objects. They actively try to defend themselves.
They do. Plants try to survive the vacuum pump by closing their stomata. Those are the tiny pores on their leaves. They close them to hold on to whatever internal water they have left.
Makes sense.
But it's a fatal trade-off. Closing the stomata stops photosynthesis, and it also traps solar heat inside the plant. The plant tissue literally overheats and dies.
Oh, wow.
So within weeks, a lush green landscape becomes explosive fuel The fire ignites, but as you mentioned, the feedback loop doesn't stop there.
No, the data on the aftermath is staggering. In 2023, the Canadian wildfires alone released roughly 640 million metric tons of carbon dioxide into the atmosphere.
It's incredible.
That is more than the annual emissions of most industrialized nations just from trees burning.
Yeah, it's a massive unplanned injection of greenhouse gases, directly accelerating the global warming that caused the fire in the first place. Furthermore, all that smoke and black soot, the black carbon, travels thousands of miles on the wind and lands on Arctic ice sheets.
Right, which darkens the ice.
Exactly. It lowers its albedo, meaning the ice absorbs more sunlight and melts even faster, which further weakens the jet stream, which creates more heat domes.
It is the ultimate vicious cycle. But let's bring this down from the global atmospheric currents directly to human biology. Because there is a very strict, uncompromising limit to what the human body can endure in this new era.
Yes, there is. In climate science and occupational health, we measure this using the wet bulb temperature, which is a metric that accounts for both absolute heat and ambient humidity.
Right.
Because the human body is essentially a biological engine, and it cools itself primarily by sweating. But for sweat to cool you down, it has to be able to evaporate off your skin into the air.
Which takes the heat with it.
Precisely. But at a wet bulb temperature of 35 degrees Celsius, which is equivalent to 95 degrees Fahrenheit, at 100% humidity, the air is fully saturated.
It's completely full.
Right. It cannot hold another drop of water, so your sweat just pools on your skin. It cannot evaporate.
And the source emphasizes just how brutal this biological ceiling is. At that specific wet bulb limit, it absolutely does not matter if you are young, perfectly healthy, sitting completely still in the deep shade, and drinking unlimited ice water.
It doesn't matter at all.
Your internal metabolic heat simply cannot escape.
It can't. Your core temperature will rise, your proteins will begin to denature, and you will die of hyperthermia within a matter of hours. It is a hard, non-negotiable physiological limit.
That is terrifying.
It is. For decades, the climate models suggested we wouldn't see sustained 35-degree wet bulb temperatures until late in the 21st century. But we are already seeing short, terrifying bursts of this exact threshold in parts of the Persian Gulf, the Indus River Valley, and northern South America.
So the edge of human habitability is arriving decades ahead of schedule.
Unfortunately, yes.
And that hard biological ceiling isn't just a risk for people living in remote deserts. It's actually being actively engineered into the places where most of us live and work. Because modern cities are suffering intensely right now. It feels like urban areas are essentially functioning as giant thermal batteries.
That is the urban heat island effect in a nutshell. We have spent a century engineering our cities with asphalt, concrete, and dark steel.
Right, all materials that actively absorb and store solar radiation all day.
Exactly. And simultaneously, we've paved over green spaces and stripped away trees, which entirely eliminates the natural cooling mechanism of evapotranspiration.
And evapotranspiration is basically trees sweating.
Right. Exactly. Trees pull water up from the deep soil and release it into the air as vapor through their leaves. That phase change actively cools the surrounding neighborhood.
But we paved over it.
Right. When you pave over a forest to build a parking lot, you aren't just removing shade, you are destroying nature's built-in air conditioner.
Which means when the sun goes down, the relief never comes. The heat just radiates back out from the pavement.
Correct. And nighttime temperature is actually the most critical factor for human survival during a heat wave.
Really? Nighttime?
Yes. If the ambient air doesn't drop below 22 degrees Celsius, about 71.6 degrees Fahrenheit at night, the human cardiovascular system gets absolutely zero rest.
Oh, because it's still trying to cool you down.
Exactly. Your heart is forced to pump constantly, pushing blood to your skin to try and cool your core. In concrete-dense cities, nighttime temperatures are getting stuck at 28 or 30 degrees Celsius. Your heart runs a marathon while you sleep.
And that extreme cardiovascular stress is heavily compounded by the smoke. We need to talk about what's actually in wildfire smoke. Because people often treat it as just a nuisance. You see hazy skies, your eyes water, and you think, oh, it smells like a campfire. But a modern megafire is not a campfire.
This raises an important question, yes, because it's a massive public health blind spot.
How so?
Well, when a modern wildfire sweeps through a landscape, especially an urban wildland interface, it is burning houses, vehicles, plastic PVC pipes, synthetic insulation, industrial chemicals. That smoke is a highly toxic chemical soup packed with PM 2.5.
Which is fine particulate matter.
Microscopic particulate matter. It is 30 times smaller than the width of a single human hair.
30 times smaller. So it completely bypasses our natural defenses.
Completely. It is so infinitesimally small that your nasal passages and the mucus lining in your lungs cannot filter it out. It bypasses the alveoli and crosses directly into your bloodstream.
Straight into the blood.
Yes. Once those toxic particles are in your blood, your immune system recognizes them as foreign invaders. Your macrophages try to attack the particles, which triggers massive systemic inflammation.
Wow.
Your blood literally thickens, increasing the risk of clotting. The epidemiological data shows undeniable spikes in hospitalizations for heart attacks and strokes within 24 to 48 hours of heavy smoke exposure.
Even if you are miles away.
Even if you are hundreds of miles away from the actual fire.
So you have extreme heat forcing your heart to pump twice as hard, combined with toxic particulate matter thickening your blood and lowering your oxygen intake. It is a lethal combination.
It really is.
Which inevitably brings up the question of protection. I think the immediate instinct for most people listening is just turn out the AC. We can just air condition our way out of this, right?
Yeah.
But the climate physicist in our source text completely dismantled that idea.
They call it the AC trap. It is one of the most dangerous misconceptions we have.
How is it a trap, though? If the wet bulb temperature outside is lethal, an air conditioner keeps you alive.
It is an essential life support system in the immediate short term, absolutely. But you have to look at the physics of how an air conditioner actually works. It doesn't magically destroy heat.
Right, just moves it.
Yes, it actively pumps the heat out of your living room and blasts it directly into the city streets, which violently worsens the urban heat island effect for everyone who happens to be outside.
Oh, that makes sense.
Furthermore, to run that compressor, it pulls massive electrical loads from grids that are predominantly powered by burning fossil fuels, which puts more carbon into the atmosphere.
Or it just strains the grid until the transformers blow and the power lines fail, leaving everyone trapped in an oven. So relying purely on mechanical AC without fundamentally redesigning our cities is just a localized Band-Aid that actively accelerates the global crisis.
Exactly. It's a feedback loop of its own.
So knowing all these compounding dangers, the atmospheric thirst, the fire thunderstorms, the wet bulb limits, and their urban heat islands, how did the experts project this playing out? Because understanding the timelines is how you actually prepare. Looking out over the next 5 to 10 years, it seems like the immediate shocks aren't just physical, they're financial.
Right. The 5-year horizon, out to roughly 2031, is essentially locked in by the greenhouse gases we've already emitted.
Yeah.
The physical reality is longer fire seasons stretching into spring and late autumn. But you're right, the most immediate shock will be economic. We're going to see severe, unmanageable instability in the home insurance markets in high-risk zones, places like California, Florida, and southern France.
So they can't predict it anymore.
Exactly. Traditional insurers simply cannot model the risk of these new megafires or floods, so they will either pull out entirely or skyrocket their premiums to the point of absolute unaffordability.
So the financial reality of the climate crisis hits your wallet long before the physical reality becomes completely unlivable. And as we look toward the 10-year horizon, that seems to be the critical divergence point for our infrastructure.
By the mid-2030s, our current choices lock in the future. If we take the best-case scenario, cities will have aggressively retrofitted.
What does that look like?
They'll have installed heat-reflective materials on roofs and massively expanded the urban canopy cover, which can actually reduce peak urban heat by 2 to 3 degrees Celsius.
That's significant.
It is. But in the most likely scenario, where global temperatures fluctuate around 1.6 to 1.8 degrees above pre-industrial levels, we start seeing cascading failures. Agricultural yields for staple crops like wheat and maize will drop noticeably.
And the power grids?
Those electrical grids we talked about, they will require massive forced overhauls just to handle the baseline summer demand.
Which naturally leads to the 20 to 50-year horizon. Reading the projections for the late century, it's clear that the physical geography of where humans can safely exist is going to shift.
Unavoidable.
We're looking at climate migration becoming a highly visible demographic movement. As people flee hyper-arid zones for cooler, elevated regions, we might see widespread use of drone or AI automated fire defense. But beyond the modeled projections, there are wildcards.
Yes, the unknowns.
The source identifies 2 major black swans that could upend these timelines entirely. Let's talk about the natural one first, the collapse of the AMOC.
The Atlantic Meridional Overturning Circulation. This is the massive system of ocean currents that acts as a global conveyor belt, transporting warm water from the tropics up to the North Atlantic. It operates based on a delicate balance of water temperature and salinity.
And as the Greenland ice sheet melts, it dumps unimaginable amounts of fresh water into the ocean, right?
Exactly. That fresh water dilutes the salty ocean water, making it less dense. Because it's less dense, it stops sinking. If it stops sinking, the entire conveyor belt grinds to a halt. If the AMOC shuts down, it radically alters global weather literally overnight. While Europe and the Northern Hemisphere might actually see sharp, destabilizing regional cooling, the really terrifying impact is in the global south.
What happens there?
It would shift the tropical monsoon belt southward, causing sudden catastrophic droughts across Africa and South America.
It would completely destabilize the global food supply. Wow. What's the second black swan?
Uncoordinated geoengineering.
Like rogue actors.
Yes. Imagine a desperate nation facing unbearable heat and famine, unilaterally deciding to inject sulfur aerosols into the stratosphere to artificially block incoming sunlight.
To mimic a volcano.
Right. It mimics a volcanic eruption. It might cool the Earth quickly, but the risk of disrupting global rainfall patterns is immense. And worse, you face termination shock.
What's termination shock?
Once you start pumping aerosols into the sky, you can't ever stop. If you do, the blocked heat rushes back in all at once, causing a massive biological shock to the system.
So what does this all mean? We've covered atmospheric physics, forestry history, biological limits, and existential wildcards. I want to pivot to the practical. Let's talk strategy. If I'm listening to this right now, how do I apply this to my life?
We have to get practical.
Exactly. For instance, it strikes me that if I'm a manager or logistics director overseeing a global supply chain, a localized heat dome over a manufacturing hub isn't just a weather event anymore. It's a systemic point of failure for my entire business.
You've hit the nail on the head. For anyone in management or operations, the mandate is to audit your supply chain immediately.
Right now.
Yes, identify those single points of failure where an extreme heat wave or a smoke event could shut down your manufacturing or delay your shipping, and build redundancy into your network now. Furthermore, you must prioritize heat safety protocols for your workforce. Mandate wet bulb globe temperature monitoring for any outdoor or warehouse workers.
What if you were a student or an early career researcher trying to figure out where to focus your energy?
The world doesn't just need more traditional climate scientists anymore. It desperately needs interdisciplinary translators.
Translators, I like that.
Yeah, merge your fields. Combine climate science with special data analysis like GIS or artificial intelligence. We need people who can take abstract climate models and turn them into practical, neighborhood-level engineering solutions.
And for the entrepreneurs and builders.
Yeah.
Because reading the source, it sounds like the demand for adaptation technology is going to be astronomical.
Oh, it is an unbelievably massive, lucrative market. The need for passive cooling materials, decentralized solar microgrids, advanced indoor air filtration systems to combat the PM 2.5, and AI-driven satellite fire detection is exploding.
So the money is there.
The capital is there for anyone who can solve these physical bottlenecks.
Which ties right into the investors and the policymakers listening.
Exactly. If you manage capital or write policy, you have to accurately price in physical climate risk. Assets in high vulnerability regions, coastal real estate, homes built in the wildland-urban interface are going to devalue.
Right.
Capital needs to rapidly flow toward community resilience, neighborhood cooling hubs, upgrading the grid, and aggressively expanding the urban canopy. Mandate cool roofs and replace heat-trapping asphalt with permeable, reflective surfaces.
Just systemic changes across the board.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, I want everyone listening to walk away with a profound sense of clear-eyed agency.
Yeah, that's crucial.
The Earth system isn't maliciously punishing humanity. It doesn't have an agenda. It is simply mechanically responding to the thermodynamic inputs we provide, which means every fraction of a degree of warming avoided, every single tree we plant in a city, every structural adaptation we build, it all restores our agency. We are not passive spectators in some apocalyptic movie. We are active participants shaping the physical reality of this planet.
Being well-informed is truly the ultimate armor in the Pyro-Thermal era. Thank you so much for breaking down the mechanics of this incredibly complex system for us.
It's been my pleasure. We have the knowledge and the tools. We just need the will to deploy them.
As we wrap up today's deep dive, I want to leave you with one final thought to mull over. Building on that idea of the AC trap and the need for passive cooling.
Oh, this is a great point.
Before the invention of mechanical air conditioning, human civilizations successfully built structures that were perfectly adapted to extreme heat. Think of the brilliant wind catchers of ancient Persia. These architectural towers were engineered to channel the slightest desert breeze down into living spaces, cooling the air as it moved.
Brilliant engineering.
Or look at the incredibly thick-walled adobe structures of the American Southwest that absorbed the brutal daytime heat and released it slowly during the freezing nights, keeping the interior temperature perfectly stable. It really makes you wonder, did we accidentally build ourselves out of our own climate resilience by relying on cheap, abundant fossil energy over the last century? And is it possible that the key to surviving the extremes of the 21st century might actually be hiding in plain sight, right inside the architectural blueprints of the ancient world? Think about it.
It's a great question.
Until next time, stay safe, stay cool, look out for your neighbors, and we'll catch you on the next deep dive.